Welcome to Evolve Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Fitzpatrick. Evolve Podcast is an open forum on personal growth and cultivating a positive mindset. Today on the show, we have Harrison Moenich. And Harrison is a multi-talented artist. I know you specialize in jewelry as well as various mixed media of painting. I also saw that you built furniture.
Yeah.
You also told me you previously had a piercing apprenticeship. So how do you summarize the work you do as an artist?
I think multimedia would probably be the best way to explain the way that I work. I think that there's like a lot of facets to what I do, and it depends on kind of like what the current project is as to how I get to the end result. So
Yeah.
I think multimedia artist is like the easiest thing to say, basically.
How do you choose the different projects that you work on?
I guess it kind of just depends on like what the motivating factor is at the time. So with my visual art, I think if I have an exhibition coming up, like it kind of dictates how things are going to go. But from like a creative standpoint, it's really kind of all over the map. For furniture or something like that, it's like out of necessity or boredom, I would say. Like, but in my fine art work, it's definitely like motivated by a concept that I'm seeking and into, I guess. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to describe like my visual art practice for sure. The jewelry stuff is a little more motivated by like, I guess, sales, you know, or like a creative outlet that keeps my hands busy, but maybe not necessarily my mind, which is kind of the opposite of my art practice, I think. So it's a little more tedious and meditative, I would say.
What are some common themes or techniques that you implement in your visual art and your jewelry?
So my visual art, I work a lot with photography. Probably I would say like first and foremost, it starts with like how the concept is related to the art form of photography. So the end result might not necessarily be photographic, but I'm always considering like the world in which we live in and how photography and how images form it. So with my probably like the most recent body of work that I completed, I was thinking a lot about photography's kind of like inception, how it was designed to identify criminals, and kind of hold them accountable for something, and how that has sort of failed us in recent years as protests have risen and police brutality has also risen. So I think a lot about the concept initially, and then like how I get there is kind of where like my creative side comes in to figure out like what it is I'm trying to display and how I'm trying to display it. And then with the jewelry stuff, I think that like specifically with the chainmail stuff I've been working on, and also like a little bit of my most recent painting work was just thinking a lot about like what it means to exist as a non-binary person, like specifically in this country. And I think unfortunately it resonates a little more now than ever with recent legislation, but certainly like I wanted to create something that felt like armor or like something powerful and like kind of remove the kind of masculine element perhaps, or at least like recalibrate it when I'm creating something. So like my jewelry name is Chainmail, which is like a pun obviously, about chainmail being like kind of such an aggressive sort of industry for a really long time, at least in adornment or costume, the world of costuming. So yeah, I was just kind of thinking about like how I could think about this armor in like a new way, or like creatively find an outlet to make a jewelry line out of something that's, you know, been used for so long as kind of shield.
I love that. And I know like some people, when, you know, they like put on their accessories for the day, I've heard people talk about it in that way of like putting on your armor against the world, something that makes you feel safe, something that makes you feel uniquely you.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I'm sure that was part of the inspiration behind it too.
For sure, yeah. I just wanted people to feel like when they wore it, they were like proud to wear something that was, you know, not only made by a queer person, but also like could help them. I mean, quite literally as weaponry if needed, but hopefully it wouldn't come down to that. But as also like a form of adornment. I, you know, think a lot about jewelry and the history of jewelry and craft, and so for me it was like a good way to kind of dive into a craft practice, which is not something I'm like typically drawn to in terms of my art practice. So it was cool to kind of dip my toes in and, you know, see what I could come up with, and yeah, and like in a fun way, and like make something that I would, you know, like to wear, and also it's so cool to see other people wear it and like really enjoy it. And it's been a fun journey for that, for sure.
Have you made any jewelry that could be used as a weapon potentially, like brass knuckles or something like that? In like the more literal sense?
I've made a lot of like wallet chains as kind of like a throwback to like 90s kind of skate culture. I think like I've been learning how to skate for 5 years or something, so you know, I think a lot about like 90s fashion, and I was like, this is something that could be really cool. And also like I think skate culture can be quite like off-putting for queer people, and I think that like, you know, I think right now is like a great time to be in the skate community, because like there's a lot of like specifically queer skaters that are getting you know, recognized and also getting sponsored, which is super cool, and like something that hasn't been the case for a really long time. So I think the wallet chain could easily be used as, you know, like a flocking device or something. And there's also like a relationship to kind of like power dynamics, and I think with like chainmail specifically, it can kind of cross over into kind of like a BDSM territory. So it's like some people have approached me about making things that can be used in play, which, you know, is cool. It's not really like what I was looking to do, but I do think it has a language that is relatable to that. So it's kind of cool to see what people like have in mind and like projects they bring to me. But from the beginning, I kind of like gave myself parameters so that I wasn't kind of like pigeonholed. So, you know, I didn't want to just be making like Ren Fair adornments. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like there's so many people already doing that. And so for me, I was kind of like, how can I make something unique and also like quite simple, like that if someone just wanted a necklace, they didn't have to like go through a whole lot of steps to access one. It was just like, these few designs that I make as necklaces, these are the few designs that I make as keychains or wallet chains. And so in that way, it's been like easy to kind of like simplify how I produce. But then the keychains can definitely be used to do some damage if they need to.
Very cool. So would you say the 90s are a big influence for you in terms of your jewelry and like the art that you create? Is that like where you draw a lot of inspiration from, or is it more a mix of like current and past?
You know, coming up in the 90s, I have a sister who's 7 years older than me, so a lot of my influence was like, you know, my parents kind of raised me as though I was the same age as her, for better or worse. So like a lot of my influences coming up were pop culture influences. So, you know, things that I probably shouldn't have been exposed to at the age I was exposed to them. But in that way, I think that it kind of like helped mold my personality, or like the things that I find interesting, or certainly like the music that I enjoy. So I think the 90s, whether or not it's overt, like certainly have a huge influence on a lot of what I do. certainly with the jewelry, but also like music, like I said. Like in my artwork, a lot of my pieces are named after lyrics from songs, many of which are from the 90s. So yeah, it definitely has like a role in my life.
What were some of those artists that had like, early positive influence on you?
I think it's kind of all over the map, but I was definitely like pretty drawn to like female singer-songwriters in the 90s. Like the entire lineup for the Lilith Fair is like something I joke about that I really like love. And then I think that like in terms of early like 90s, I was informed by and surrounded by grunge. Like when Kurt Cobain died, it was like a huge thing in our house, because my sister was really into that music. So early on, definitely like grunge and a lot of 90s radio rock, and then later heavier things, and more like of a punk influence, but certainly the radio had a lot to do with it, just because we were like radio kids growing up.
So how old are you in relation to your sister?
So I was born in 1986 and she was born in 1979.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a gap. But I like to say that she was an only child until she wasn't, and then she was still an only child the rest of our lives. So, but we get along really well.
That's good. I was born in 87, and I'm the oldest in my family, oldest kid anyway. So I never had that like older sibling dynamic. I was always the oldest.
You were the one bringing the music in the house?
Yeah, much to my siblings' dismay.
Yeah.
I got into like punk and metal and stuff when I was in high school, and that carried over into college and adulthood. And I would always be like playing music in my room really loudly and being an angsty teenager. And my siblings didn't really appreciate that kind of music at all.
Yeah, I think that our musical tastes diverged.
Yeah.
Like after like 96, or 98, I guess. But yeah, it's funny like having that kind of relationship with a sibling to where they either love or hate what it is that you're providing.
Right. So was your sister an influence in your the art that you were creating as well, or did that come from someone else?
My grandmother was a painter, so our house was like very like involved in the arts. So like I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. She took classes at the VMFA all the time. So we were always downtown. We were always like around the art scene. We were if we went on field trips, we were going to museums, art museums. So, and she was really proud of all of her art books that she had, like all of her art history books. So like we grew up learning about the greats, and I think that had, a large impact on where we found our interests. So my sister's pretty art savvy, but she was professionally a teacher, so a lot of that made its way into teaching, and it sort of filtered through that. And I work in education as well, but it's a little, I went to graduate school for fine arts, so it's a little bit of a different path, but my biggest art influence would have been my grandmother growing up for sure.
What type of art did she do?
She was a painter, primarily oil, but I have like one of her paintings in my bedroom, and I just cherish art because of her. Like that's an easy answer for sure. She's like the reason that I became an artist.
And you do oil paintings as well?
My painting work is primarily acrylic, but I'm using an airbrush, which is something that she would frown upon. I did special effects makeup for almost a decade, and so most of the painting in my adult life that I learned how to do was on a 3D canvas, because I was, recreating people's facial structures and turning them into monsters essentially. It applies itself to my work now in a lot of ways, because I build up canvases with a lot of like material, and there's a lot of texture involved. So similar to how I would have to move a face to apply paint to it, I do the same thing on canvases now with my painting work. Yeah, for sure.
So how did you get into that with like costuming and makeup?
Kind of going back to what we were talking about previously, like I was obsessed with horror movies when I was a kid. I was, I watched, I watched it like when it came on TV, which I was like far too young to watch that movie. But I think like being scared and being excited about being scared, had a lot to do with what I was interested in when I was younger. One of the first movies I remember seeing in theaters is Batman Returns, and just being like blown away by how transformed Danny DeVito was as the Penguin. And at the end, spoiler alert, when Catwoman kills Max Schreck, I remember seeing his face and thinking like, how did they do that? And I was just so interested in it. So horror has always been a huge part of my life, and just like the fun of the reveal has always been a huge thing I've been interested in, and like the concept or idea of like illusion is something that I like find really fascinating. So I got into that, I think, quite naturally because I was beginning my art school career, and a friend of mine was like, there's this job opening available, and it's in makeup. And at the time I was like, I don't have any interest in working what I thought was makeup at the time, which would have been like Mary Kay or something. I was like, I'm not interested in that at all. And she was like, no, I don't think you understand. This is like making people, look terrible. And I was like, I'm in. And so I did a quite extensive training and just fell in love with it. And then that ended up being my career for a while.
So you were doing that while you were in school?
I was doing that while I was in school, and then post-graduation for a little while. And I was helping run a gallery, studio space, like an artist collective. So those were kind of the two things I was doing before graduate school, and then I left and moved to Detroit for a little while, and then moved back, and then I got involved with an artist-run gallery, kind of similar to the studio space, but definitely like more focused on showing other people's work, not my own. So it's kind of, I don't know, I think it's like all similar like pulse of like the question of like what is art, I think that's always like something I'm really fascinated by, and who's making and why, so yeah, and like what can art be a catalyst for, and for me in special effects makeup, I think it was like, here's all these influences and things in my brain from the, slasher movies of the 70s onwards, and like, how can I turn that into something that is going to like terrorize someone? Because all these actors, would like then go out and do their job of like scaring people. So, it was a lot of fun. I definitely miss it for sure.
So how do you define what art is based on your experience that you shared with me?
Wow, that's a really big question that people far smarter than I would be better equipped to answer. I think art is kind of what we make it, I don't know. I have an answer for what I think my art is, but I personally wouldn't hold anyone else accountable to those rules.
Sure. How do you describe your art then?
I think my art is kind of designed to make people question what it is they're looking at. I think it's, kind of important for us to look at something and say like, can I take this at face value, or is there something a little more sinister about what it is that I'm seeing? So I think an example, like my recent photo work is like very manipulated, and it almost takes on the quality of a watercolor painting, and the way that I display it is reminiscent of kind of like an artifact of a painting. So, but it is not a painting, it's a photograph. So for me, it's like thinking about what can confuse or elicit like a response of intrigue from someone to kind of dig further, and then that's kind of like when layers of information are applied. So that might be like the title of the piece, or it might be in the description of what it is made from, that kind of guides the viewer along or holds their hand or like gestures in a direction. And I think for me that's kind of important. There has to be like a layer of maybe not trickery, but like visual disruption that makes you kind of second guess what it is you're seeing. And that's kind of been an interest of mine since the special effects makeup as well, just because there's this veneer of illusion or like uncertainty that I like walking that line, like making people question what it is they think they know about something. And I think specifically with photography, like because we are a culture that is so inundated with images now, and have been for, since the invention of the internet, I think that
arguably since the invention of the photograph.
Right, yeah. But I think its relationship to maybe like media and news is like now more than ever designed to become a gray area, and so I'm interested in like that path and like the desire for something to be taken at face value. I think we would like things to be simpler than they are, but that's just simply not the case. And I think photography has a huge role and like responsibility in that being the way it is now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think photos, since they have become so much more accessible to people, with smartphones, having a camera on every device, I think that just makes people question of course it makes people question the quality of photography and like what you're actually capturing, whether that's art or just a representation of what's in front of you. But also it also makes me think of the concept of perception, how like while you may see something through the lens of a camera, I may see something completely different.
Totally.
So I think that really plays into that theme of, what is true and what is actually being presented in the photograph as well.
Yeah, totally.
I'm curious though to know, like, what is your technique for manipulating these photographs to create that element of illusion?
Sure. So in that body of work that I was referencing, I basically like, because I'm thinking about photography's failures or its inability to do its job, which even in itself is like kind of a joke, right? Because like it is not all-knowing being, or
right.
like not yet. So yeah, I'm like kind of poking fun at the idea that a photograph has to be perfect. So in a fine art context, there's like a long history of what it is you do to a film negative to get it from the camera to the canvas, or not the canvas but the printed image, be it analog or digital.
Right.
And so I'm kind of like trying to kind of remove the idea that there's this end goal of perfection, because I think that like we teach people, like there's no such thing as as being perfect, right? And so in my photo work, I'm like very much amping that up to 11. So I'm sourcing images from Google. I'm not actually making my own images in this most recent body of work. And I'm getting images that now are much harder to find, but when I was sourcing them, they were easily accessible, and that's because they've become kind of like these images of, figureheads are kind of intentionally being obscured so that people can't access them as easily, because there are repercussions for when certain things are disseminated. So the images that I use are printed on a material that rejects the ink. So I'm using a large format fine art printer, which its intended use is to get you like the perfect pristine print, but I'm using a paper that resists ink. So it's like there is no way to kind of make these two worlds work in tandem, which is a kind of like, commentary on photography, but it's also a commentary on like the images that I'm producing, who they're of, what these people have done, and kind of like what what they've gotten away with, and under the guise or under the protection of their employment. So a lot of these images are of police officers who have murdered people on screen, on video, camera, or with plenty of photographic evidence, but many of them are not even losing their jobs. And even if they're found guilty, you know, most of the people that I'm taking photos of they don't even go to trial, despite the insurmountable evidence. So yeah, I'm using kind of these tools that go against each other to produce these photographs, and they become quite warped and manipulated and turn what would be like a professional headshot into kind of like a monster, essentially. So they become warped figures, and then I put them behind plexiglass. I mount them to acrylic, and they become kind of like a plaque that you would receive if you won an award. And then they're displayed kind of rigidly on these structures that I create out of steel and weld together. So there's this kind of rough juxtaposition where there's this idea of celebration, but it's at the cost of someone's life, you know, who 9 times out of 10, or maybe arguably 10 times out of 10, didn't deserve or, you know, the punishment that they were given.
It's powerful. Is your work on display in any galleries?
Not currently, no. So that work's been shown in Richmond, and then the pandemic kind of upended a few solo shows that I had planned, but it's been shown in group shows. I don't have anything coming up right now, but I am kind of producing different work now, or thinking about work differently now. I'm using similar processes, but the shift has kind of broadened. It's not so specific to the police force. It's a little more general, but that's kind of down the line. So I'm kind of like thinking about it right now and how I'm gonna execute it.
Okay, nice choice of word there. So have you explored the themes of like diversity and inclusion in terms of like in reference to like trans people and non-binary people in your work as well?
Certainly, yeah. So my most recent work on painting, the airbrush paintings that I was mentioning previously, were shown at Iridian Gallery last year at a solo show there. And that was primarily thinking about like non-gendered bodies and how they navigate through either cis or trans spaces, and how oftentimes, though considered a large part of the queer community, are sometimes you know, excluded in certain conversations or certain circles. So yeah, just thinking about like navigating as someone who has to think about those things pretty carefully, like whether that be traveling to a certain place where it is a little more aggressive, which of course now unfortunately is many places, but when I was producing the work, it wasn't quite so politically on the nose, I think, because it wasn't quite like under the same kind of sordid attack that it is currently under. So yeah, that body of work was totally about like the experiences of a non-binary person navigating social circles.
Does the current political climate give you any inclinations to revisit that topic?
I think it'll probably always be like at the forefront of my mind, but that might be like more of a personal kind of like confrontation than necessarily like how it will manifest in my work. I think that I'm still interested in showing that work. A lot of it was, I won't say that it wasn't like as relevant as it is right now, because I was like, before that show opened, I was targeted on like a doxing website, incel doxing website.
Really?
So like at the opening, I was like pretty fearful that there would be a reaction, and I think it was like a week prior there had been like far right demonstrators at a drag show at the Space. So I was pretty concerned about the opening, but thankfully that was fine. And then I with my jewelry work, I do show like at a lot of queer markets, and so there was a market that security had to be hired for because there was another group of people protesting queer people selling their artwork, which just seems completely ridiculous. But yeah, it's so as long as I think those things are happening, it will always be kind of a consideration. Whether or not that is at the forefront of like the topic of my work, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I think after the photographic work I was mentioning, like I needed to take quite a long break from that after making it. I work quite slowly with that stuff, and those pieces can take up to a month to dry before even handling them. So yeah, it's just a long, slow, arduous process. And so I think that moving forward, I just have to consider that because it does take a long time to produce. So whether or not the subject matter will remain the same in the photo work, I'm not sure.
Yeah. So in terms of your photography, do you do like any personal photography, or is it just like, I mean, do you do any personal photography for your art, or is it mainly just like for fun on social media?
I do think about photography a lot.
Yeah.
And I have several film cameras that I use, and if I'm doing any like traveling or anything, I always take my film camera with me. I think there's like something to be said for kind of like slowing down and thinking methodically about capturing a photograph. So I'm always taking photos for sure. The level of like how kind of serious versus silly those photos end up becoming is, you know, all over the map. But I definitely regularly continue to take photos that aren't necessarily like pieces that will work themselves into my fine art practice.
But do you like keep a photography portfolio as well?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Not necessarily, no. A lot of the work ends up living online, so I mean it has to be photographed, so in that way, like sort of. But I think that for a while I was just kind of using Instagram for that. But yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know. I don't have like a plan to keep an archive or anything, but I certainly like am always taking photos and thinking about them. Yeah.
Cool. I want to briefly touch on your piercing apprenticeship. Since you mentioned that at the top of the show. Can you tell me about that experience and why you decided to do that?
Sure, yeah. So I should say that was right when I was moving back to Richmond in like 2007. So I was being kind of like, what's the word? Like being prepared for a piercing apprenticeship through someone I was dating at the time. And I've always been really into body modification, so it was kind of like a natural progression in my opinion. There was a website, blog, like lifestyle website, called BME Zine. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it stood for Body Modification E-Zine. And Shannon Lorrat was the original creator of that, and he was kind of a pioneer in body mod. And so from quite a young age, maybe like 15 years old, I was on that website, and you know, a lot of my social circles were created through that website. So it's like definitely has like a huge place in my heart. But through that, I met many piercers, and I got into like body suspension and that whole world. And so I kind of wanted to be involved in that from a really young age, and it just kind of didn't work out originally. And so more recently, I've been really interested in tattooing, but piercing has always been something that I've been really passionate about. As I would like maybe more define it personally as like body art, like is something that I've always kind of been interested in, body adornment, body mod. So yeah, that was kind of what happened then. And then since, I've been really interested in a few different things, one of which is tattooing, which I am pursuing. And then another one is body jewelry creation. So right now, and I'm sure you'll talk to Morgan more about this, but the piercing industry has changed so dramatically since I was kind of trying to get involved in it, and now there's so much better quality jewelry than has ever existed, and there's so many opportunities for people to create really unique pieces, and that's kind of what I'm drawn to, and I think that has a lot to do with like my interest in craft, with the jewelry line that I've been making for a couple years, and just expanding that a little bit. And so I'd be really interested to get involved in actual gold jewelry, and I'm taking a class right now with for stone setting at the Visual Arts Center of Richmond, who are wonderful. All of their classes are amazing, and yeah, so I'm excited about that, to learn a little bit of jewelry making, and I kind of think that that might be my involvement in like piercing, I guess, to a larger degree, is more so like creating some jewelry, which I think is maybe like a little more in my wheelhouse at the current moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're already making jewelry. You know, it seems like the next evolution of your, you know, jewelry making journey to make jewelry that you can also like put on your body and not just wear on your body.
Totally. And it's, you know, people are excited about it right now, which is really cool, because for a long time, piercing kind of like had a lull, you know, and I think that now that it's back, it's like, it's an exciting time to create some new cool things that people would be excited to wear. So
yeah, absolutely.
In the same way that I was excited about the chainmail stuff, I think that this could be like a potential evolution of what I've been creating, which is exciting.
And you're pursuing an apprenticeship in tattooing as well?
Yeah, so we'll see.
Have you started reaching out to tattoo shops?
Yeah, I've kind of like been reaching out to a lot of people, so we'll see. I've been drawing a lot. I just think because I'm a little older, like it's not quite as easy, you know. An 18-year-old can spend all day at a tattoo shop and dedicate their life to working for free. But I have other kind of endeavors that I can't really get out of. But I've been involved in the arts for so long, and I've been in the tattoo world and the body mod world since I was a teenager. So like it's always been something that's been part of my life, but it hasn't been something that I have like actively thought about pursuing so much. So like for years I did a lot of stick and pokes on friends, and that's kind of what made me interested in pursuing like machine tattooing. So yeah, I'm keeping my options open, visiting a lot of shops, talking to a lot of friends, and just drawing as much as I can. So we'll see. I'm getting a portfolio together. So
sounds like you're doing it the right way. I know like some people can buy like an electric tattoo gun off Amazon,
Right.
and like just start tattooing their friends, which we don't recommend at all.
Yeah.
Even though that is possible, but that's really cool. I mean, obviously you're covered in tattoos and you have a lot of beautiful work.
Thank you.
When did you start getting tattooed and like modifying your body?
Well, modifying my body like early in my teens.
Yeah.
So I had really large stretched ears, 2 inches. I've since had them closed up because I had so much scar tissue and I really just didn't like the way it was looking anymore. So I'm a little sad, I miss them, but yeah, so pretty early on in my teens. But I knew from a young age that I was gonna be, heavily tattooed. Just because I was obsessed with wrestling as a kid, and like my favorite wrestlers were like, I don't know, like the DX, right, or like Road Dogg, or Raven is my favorite wrestler, and Raven has had a ton of tattoos, and so I always knew it was like something I was interested in, and yeah, and so that kind of was the beginning of my body mod journey, and then I did suspensions, around 18, and then through my early 20s. BME Zine, the website that I mentioned, they used to have these things called BME barbecues, and in the summer, like, it was just a gathering of modified people that would like hang out and have a giant party barbecue in a public park, and then like whoever wanted to learn about suspension like was welcome to, and probably already knew about it because of the website, but so that world was kind of open to me through my mutual friends who were either piercers or tattooers, or like people who were doing heavy mods, like tongue splitting or whatever the case may be. So that kind of, from a young age, I knew that I was interested in it and that I would pursue it for sure.
And you got your tongue split too, right?
I do, yeah.
When did you get that done?
Actually not that long ago, like 4 years, maybe 3 years. I waited a really, really long time to do it, and I'm kind of glad I did because the technology has advanced a lot, and I didn't want to have to go through what some of my friends went through in the early 2000s. So, yeah, it was pretty recent, like 3 years maybe, but yeah, it was an experience.
What was your first body modification?
I think, and this is also something like do not recommend, but I pierced my navel with a safety pin probably, and then pretty soon after I became really good friends with a person who was apprenticing to become a piercer, and then their mentor when I was of age, and then in North Carolina, where I was living at the time, you could get pierced at 16 as long as your parent signed for you. So I got my tongue pierced probably when I turned 16, and then it just kind of went on from there.
Wait, so your parents, they were supportive of your body modification goals?
No, not at all. But I think when I started getting heavily tattooed, or not even heavily tattooed, when I just started getting tattooed, one of my first big pieces were portraits of each of them, and so I think that maybe softened the blow. So I made it clear, your child loves you.
That's a nice gesture.
Don't be angry. But yeah, now they think it's really cool, obviously, and they're supportive, and they're excited to see what comes of tattooing, because I have a kind of interesting perspective on art, and I'm interested in like kind of doing something that's a little different than at least like a lot of what's going on in Richmond. So I have a lot of ideas, and I'm excited about what that looks like in the future.
Can you share some of those ideas for like what you want to do, or like what you're visualizing?
Just kind of like more illustrative work that's got its foundational roots in traditional, but it's not necessarily so rigidly tied to it. So there's a lot of like tattooers working out of Europe, specifically like Italy and Spain, that I'm really interested in right now, and Germany. And so yeah, I'm gonna be visiting some of their shops soon, which is really exciting, and getting to meet them. And yeah, it's just pretty unique to those areas. So I'm excited to just think about my work in a new way, which is cool.
Your last name, is that German?
It's Czech.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any Czech influences in there as well?
Actually there is, let's see, there's someone I follow in, what city are they in? Maybe they're in Prague. But it is similar to the work that I'm describing.
Okay.
Now that I think about it, which is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like a more kind of, I don't want to say cartoony because that is like, I don't know, it sounds kind of like demeaning.
Yeah, sure.
It's not cartoony, but it is a language of kind of comic illustration, I think.
Not exactly new school.
No, definitely not new
No.
school, yeah. Yeah, it's just a little more painterly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to
More
describe
illustrative.
it. Yeah, for
that
sure.
type of thing. Okay.
They're still hard, bold lines, but
Mm-hmm.
what's inside those lines isn't quite as easily repeatable as
Mm-hmm.
maybe like what's happening in the U.S. right now.
Okay, very cool. Well, can't wait to see that. Sounds really interesting. I'm also really interested in exploring with you the concept of body modification as it comes to health and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've heard before people describe like bodybuilding or you know, weight loss as a form of body modification. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that like obviously like someone who's interested in like splitting their tongue in half has to like I would think, you know, think a lot about bodily autonomy, and I think that like that's, you know, something I totally agree with and subscribe to. And so I think that people should be able to kind of reclaim their body, you know, however they see fit. So certainly like a lot of people that I've met maybe have problems with like certain cosmetic procedures, which is interesting to me, especially like as a heavily modified person, because I'm like, well, what's wrong with Botox? It's like no different than, I don't know, like plastic surgery is like very similar to body mod in my opinion, you know? So, and bodybuilding can be similar as well, you know, like people completely radicalizing their bodies, you know, is like totally part of body mod.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think it can also be used in conjunction with one another in really like interesting and beautiful ways. So I know a lot of bodybuilders who are like very heavily modded, and you know, I think it's a good conversation to have, like,
Yeah.
you know, like why we think that like breast implants are like bad or whatever, but like, I don't know, tribal tattoo is appropriate, you know, like,
Right.
yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation because some people really get worked up about it.
Personally, I don't think tribal tattoos are appropriate. Pun intended on that one. They're a garbage tattoo, but that's just my personal opinion.
I don't have any, so don't look at me.
I didn't think so. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. And, you know, there is this double standard on what is considered quote unquote culturally acceptable versus unacceptable. It depends on who you're asking also, you know. What is considered the norm or agreeable depends on where you live, who you associate with, what your environment is. And, you know, the same goes for body modifications of people who are transitioning from one gender to another, or, you know, just trying to change something about themselves that they don't like body fat, you know? And I think it's important for humans to have the autonomy and the legal rights to be able to make those changes as they see fit. And it's unfortunate that some people are obstructing that autonomy.
Totally, yeah, and there's like a long history of it. I mean, right, like, you know, people want to control other people, which in this country is like unfortunately rampant right now.
Yeah.
So
While we're on the topic of body modification and health and wellness, I know you've been prioritizing your health and wellness in different ways, like running and bike riding. Are those the primary ways that you practice movement?
Yeah, definitely. I have like a really interesting relationship to exercise. I think about like if I was 16 and talking to myself now at my age, I think that I would be like, who is this? I played soccer in high school, but it was not for very long. And when I was much younger, I was pretty active. I was on a competitive jump roping team, which is kind of funny. Wow. Yeah, I've always been drawn to like biking, and I mentioned it a little bit previously, but skateboarding. But right. I think when I was young, I was really scared off from skateboarding because it was so macho, and because I was like, I just didn't get along with the kids that were doing that. But I always like really admired it. So I think like learning how to skateboard for me has been huge because it's been something that I'm a very tall person. So like it's I'm always drawn to things that tall people shouldn't be drawn to, I guess. But it's been so rewarding to skateboard. Like I don't know why like it took me so long to figure out like how fun it was and how freeing it is. But yeah, I mean, I primarily like just skate around the park and do a lot of like vert. I'm not really like someone who's doing a lot of like tricks, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. And so I think that kind of started like a period of my life where I was thinking about getting in shape because I was like, this is something that I've never sought, but like right. I really want to. I had like a few like health issues that I was like interested in working out, and so through skateboarding and then eventually running, I was able to kind of change my lifestyle in a way that was like hugely beneficial to me. So I have always like gotten around by bicycle, but I was never doing like long-term riding, and I think that's also changed recently. So I got a gravel bike finally, awesome. Which I've wanted for a really long time. Yeah. Because I primarily rode like a fixed gear bike for most of my 20s, and so yeah, I think that it's been a huge like I just like a weight off my chest, like getting more active, and I'd really like to start swimming a lot more than I do because I swam a lot when I was a kid. But yeah, I think that being active is like really important to me right now. So, and has been for a few years. And yeah, I love it.
What caused you to want to change your lifestyle to be more active?
I think really like skateboarding, honestly.
Just so you could be more fit, so you could skateboard more?
Not necessarily. I think that I had always had like ambitions of being like how, again, I think this ties back into like body mod for me personally, is like there's a goal that I have in mind, like, and whether or not like I understand really like why I want to get to that goal, it's important for me to try to get to it. And so my goal most recently was running the 10K, which like is never something I could have accomplished previously, I don't think. Like even like I've never been like a type of person who does like weight training or anything, and I got really into that for a few years, and after probably like 2 years of doing it, I was like, okay, I feel like I'm in a good place now. I want to like really focus on cardio, and I was like, I want to run a race. I've never done it. I want to run the whole time. Like I don't want to stop, because I've walked certainly like 5Ks and stuff, but or 6Ks, various like fundraiser things, but I was like, I want to run the whole time, and so that was my goal for the race. But skateboarding made me like realize, oh, I can't do this unless I'm in a better shape to be able to do it like for hours at a time, because I was getting so tired. But it was so fun, I was motivated to continue. So I think that was kind of the linchpin.
So did you run all of the 10K?
I did, yeah.
That's awesome.
I was only, I think I was like less than 7 minutes from my goal. So awesome. For my first 10K, I'm like pretty proud of that.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was really hard. But afterwards, I realized I wasn't winded for very long, which is like a new thing in my life. So I was like, this is something that feels really good. Like I could do a longer run. And like I really wanted to do a marathon, but I don't, that's something I would have to prepare quite a while in advance
Yeah,
for. So
it takes a lot of training, a lot of effort. I've done one marathon successfully. I would like to do another marathon next year.
awesome.
But yeah, I've been a big fan of running for many years, and recently I've been more invested in cycling, but I have ambitions of eventually doing an Ironman.
Nice.
So I want to recommit to my running practice as well. I did my first triathlon earlier this year in
Awesome.
April.
Congrats.
Thank you. And so I'm on the path. I definitely need to do more swim training to get better at that. So maybe I'll be reaching out to you
Yeah.
for some swim tips.
You've got a pool right here.
Yeah, exactly. It's not big, but can do a lot of laps.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, many laps. So what are your goals for like running? Like, are you planning to do like a half marathon before you train for the marathon?
That would be the goal, yeah.
Yeah.
Right now I've signed up for the 10K for next year,
Nice.
so I needed to take a break because
Mhm.
I was kind of getting pretty overwhelmed, I think, with everything that was going on at once,
Yeah.
because I had a lot of other stuff going on.
Mhm.
So I've taken a little break over the summer also because I just don't love the heat.
Me neither.
And so I would like to run in colder weather. That's always preferred for me. I like to skate in colder weather too. It's just I just love the cold. So I needed a little break this summer just because it's gotten so hot. But yeah, I've signed up for the 10K next year.
Awesome.
So that's my next kind of goal. And then beyond that, I would like to do the half marathon after. So we'll see how hard I can train for the 10K. I signed up for 2 10Ks in 1 week, so
Okay.
I've got some work to do.
What's
But
the other one?
it's just a practice for that 10K,
Okay.
and it's virtual, I think. So I just have to find a treadmill and then join in, and then do the damn thing. But my goal was an hour, which for me just seems impossible. But I got an hour in I think 6 minutes, so I was pretty stoked that
Yeah.
I was able to do that and then not immediately die. So
Well, I'm fairly confident that you could definitely pull it off in an hour.
high hopes.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move towards wrapping up. We just have a few more questions for you, starting with our mindset moment. What is a quote or phrase that you use in personal hardships to help you stay positive?
I knew this question was coming. I'm trying to. I am kind of a junkie for song lyrics that really resonate with me. Maybe junkie is an inappropriate way to say that. I really like songwriters, and Conor Oberst is my favorite songwriter. And there's a lyric on the new Bright Eyes album. And it says you got to keep on going like it ain't the end, and I think that's I don't know, it really resonated with me, and I think about it a lot.
I like that. Do you know what song that's from?
I think it's from Dance and Sing.
Okay, I'll have to check it out. Next is PMA Warrior of the Week. Who is someone who helps you maintain a positive mental attitude?
I definitely think that's my partner, Carly. Yeah. She's got a very positive outlook, and really helps ground me when I'm feeling like I'm floating away. So that'd have to be her.
Props to Carly then.
Yeah. Props to Carly.
Lastly, where can people connect with you if they want to follow along with you on your journey?
My chainmail account is called Chainveil, and that's on Instagram. And my fine art account is just my name. It's Harrison Moenich on Instagram. So.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I manage a few pages myself, what with my personal page, this podcast, and then I also have my clothing brand that I started earlier this year. And I'm constantly posting the same stuff on all three, trying to tie it all together. Thank you again for
thanks
this
for having me.
conversation. It was great talking to you and getting to know you.
Yeah, you as well.
And appreciate you being here.
Yeah, let's go for a run.
Yeah. Or a bike ride.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, later. Thanks for watching Evolved Podcast. Follow at evolvedpodcast.co on Instagram for weekly updates. Subscribe to Evolved Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and like your favorite episodes. Production and editing by Joe Fitzpatrick. Our theme music, Endless Cruise, is written and performed by Fingers, spelled F1NG3RS.